This is the Impunity Observer podcast. Fergus Hodgson, publisher of the outlet. Go to impunityobserver.com for more information. I'm so pleased to have with me Esteban Hernández today. He is editor-in-chief of ContraPoder News, a Venezuelan exile in Miami, journalist covering the country in great detail. So we can get right to the heat of the meat or right to the heart of the story with the Venezuelan elections. So I'm glad he's given his time at this, juncture of so much action. Now, Esteban, welcome to the Impunity Observer podcast, and please tell me, did anyone actually believe there could have been an opposition victory this weekend?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, especially at this time of uncertainty, where people, and the regime is trying to spread disinformation and misinformation through social media and through international actors to say what is actually not happening, right? Regarding the elections, there were like a lot of visions. That were contradicting themselves, because there was a group of the opposition who actually thought that because the difference was going to be so big. Let's remember that in a fair election, Edmundo González Urrutia would have won by at least 40 points, like 70-30, at least. That would be like the most conservative number or outcome, estimate in a fair election. So there was people who were saying that because it was going to be so huge, it was going to be a landslide. There was no realistic way for the regime to execute an electoral fraud. So there were a lot of people putting their hopes on that issue, but there was also the other group who were saying that this election was actually just a way to generate or to ignite, a spark. Basically, that is the word that they use, a spark, so they can use this as an excuse to go to the streets and to basically eventually overthrow the regime of Nicolás Maduro. So right now, if you're following the news, there have been a lot of riots. They are numerous, however, they're not as big as some riots that we saw before in Venezuela. And the political leadership is not joining this protest. They're not joining this, people who are on the streets trying to defend the votes and the actions that they took during the elections. Right now, the political leadership, they are telling people to calm down. They have all of the proof, that the fraud was committed. They put up a website just a few hours ago where they are showing the actual results with about 70% of the data that they have. Like they still don't have the 100% of the data, and they're showing this to other governments around the world. The electoral authority, el Consejo Nacional Electoral, they haven't published the official numbers on their website. Their website has been actually down after they gave the results. And a lot of governments around the world are asking for these numbers to see whether they recognize Nicolás Maduro or not.
Let's just clarify then. So the opposition candidate, Edmundo González, was basically a second choice pick behind Maria Corina Machado, who's been a long-time opposition leader, but was, through maybe a technicality, not permitted to be a candidate. And what is so I'm getting confused there. What was the initial published result from the Electoral Council, which is no longer available, apparently?
Well, it's not available, on their website. They never publish it, but they always have like a first report, and they say when the tendency is irreversible. Basically, if you add whatever is left to one candidate, it's not going to change the results. So with 80% of the data that they got, they say that Nicolás Maduro won the election with 51% of the votes, and Edmundo González Urrutia came in second with 46% of the votes, giving Maduro an advantage of 7%, and then all of the other candidates together, 4.6. They didn't even try to give them individual numbers, basically saying, okay, Fergus got 1.4, Esteban got 1.2. No, they just said all of the others 4.6, just like that. It just made up numbers that don't make sense, and there is a reason why they haven't published them yet. However, I wouldn't even pay attention to any numbers that they publish, after all of this time, because They're actually fabricating those numbers, you know? They have all of the system, they have basically the means to fabricate fake ballots and then polish them and send them to the US and to the governments that are requesting them. Obviously, they need a little bit of time because they need the numbers to match. But I think, and maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I think that's what's going to happen. So the international community shouldn't fall for it.
Okay. So yeah, the results initially provided were not complete. They were primitive, and as in your mind, just fabricated. And this is one thing that always does intrigue me, that there probably is about a quarter of the Venezuelan population that actually supports the regime. Are they just all government workers or military personnel? Who are these people?
Well, yeah, the military personnel, obviously, this is something that I have always said because this is actually, and I forgot to mention it, there was another, how would I say, like another group of people who didn't have any hopes on the elections. They maybe didn't think that they were going to go to the streets, but there was, a group of people who thought that maybe because of, this landslide, because this huge victory on Edmundo González Urrutia against Nicolás Maduro, that the military personnel were going to switch sides. They were basically going to go against Maduro. Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Oh, they were going to just say they go where the power is going. Yeah, sure.
Exactly, I forgot to mention that. And I always said that is not going to happen because the military personnel, like especially the ones at the top of the pyramid, they are involved in many businesses, obviously illegal businesses, that give them way more money than any democratic government would be able to provide them. And not only that, they have also been involved in many crimes that it doesn't matter if they commit them today, they could process them and bring them to justice in 60 years. So for them, this is actually a life or death situation, or maybe life or liberty situation. They can negotiate today with you or with me, but then if tomorrow you're not the president of the US anymore, then another US president can say, I want to process these people. So yeah, who are the people that support them? Everybody who's basically uh, part of these elites, that maybe could be about 10% of the population. And then you have all of the people who, they still believe in those ideas. They blame the US for the crisis. They blame external actors or even the opposition. They call them fascists. They say, I'd rather be hungry than, than being governed by Nazis or whatever like that. And actually, these numbers are not, yeah, it's funny and sad at the same time. And actually, these numbers shouldn't be that let's say surprising, because when you look at any government in the world, when they're unpopular, they always get about 30% of the support of the people. For example, Gustavo Petro in Colombia, he's very unpopular. He has about 30% of support. Gabriel Boric in Chile, the same. Lula da Silva in Brazil, the same. So that is usually the number of people. There's like a 30% of the population who is always going to support you no matter what. There's about a 30% of the population who's always going to hate you no matter what. And then you have, all of the other people who actually change sides depending on the whole situation.
Yeah, it reminds me of the bootleggers and Baptists scenario where you have basically people who make a living through the black market, right, who are looting the country. And this has been going on for so many years, selling whether it's oil or other, let's say, precious resources informally. And then you have the people who, for whatever reason, are clinging to some dream of Chavismo. And yes, they've bought the line that all the problems of Venezuela are the fault of the imperialistas. And it's just a tragedy. So, but that was one thing that shocked me when I went to Venezuela in 2014, that there were people around who were they still were big believers in Chavismo. And like you said, so if you have the people who are really feeding at the trough and the people who are caught up in this false dream, yes, there might be about a quarter of the population of Venezuela, but not enough to win an election.
Maybe even less, because the situation is so critical that maybe that 30%, 25, maybe it comes down to 20 or maybe even less than 20. But it's always, a bunch of fanatics and the people who are actually benefiting from that. That's what it is.
Yeah, so it's tough. Yeah, you have to really be a strong believer when you look around you and the situation is so bad. Now, this is really what the crux of the matter is. How does this actual theft go on? How much do you have any insiders? Has your outlet been able to get any kind of leak as to what is going on in the electoral process?
No, there hasn't been any leak. I mean, I mean, the leaks that we have got is the ones that everybody got. Basically, there is no leak. There is no special information. I think that everything that you're seeing in the public right now is actually what is happening also in private. But you were asking a really important question. What's going to happen with that? I don't have the answer, and that's what actually worries me because I was telling I've been giving a lot of interviews during this time, right, yesterday and today, and when they ask me that and they say, yeah, we're gonna prove that there was an electoral fraud. Okay, what are you gonna do with that proof? Are you gonna take it to the international community to ask for what? Are you gonna just ask them to not recognize Maduro? They did that already in 2019 and 2020, and it didn't work out. Are you going to ask them to not recognize him, but also recognize you? If they recognize you, what are you going to do with the power? Are you just going to go to the Supreme Court, for example, that is also controlled by the regime? Are you going to go to the electoral authorities? They are the ones that committed the fraud. So to me, this is just part of what I'm seeing that worries me because I have seen also this in the past. In 2013, when Enrique Capriles also won the election, he started doing the same strategy. We have the proof, we're going to go through the authorities, and then what happens? I mean, 2013, 11 years later, Nicolás Maduro is still in power. And now, Maria Corina Machado, by the way, an hour, about 45 minutes since the time of this recording, they're going to have like a citizens assemblies or something of the sort. Juan Guaido in 2019 did the same. They have people on the streets and then they say, okay, we're just going to go and to these gatherings just to talk to each other and do whatever. I don't see a clear strategy. I'm actually worried that this is just going to be another act that emulates what happened in the past. So if you don't have a clear strategy with whatever proof you have, then just Nicolás Maduro is gonna stick to power and he's gonna get stronger actually, because the more of these failed movements or whatever initiative that you take against him fail, the stronger he gets.
In some ways, it almost cements the despair in the people that they become ambivalent or just give up, right? Apathetic almost. Now, just for people listening, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, July 30, and we'll have this out as quickly as possible. What do you think the regime, since anyone with his eyes open can see that it is a black market or narco operation disguising itself as a government, why do they even hold elections? Why don't they just become like Cuba?
Yes, because what they want to do is to be a legitimate government that is recognized by the international community. They don't want to be isolated. They want to have normal regular commercial relationships with the US, for example. Actually, the US is the one that has always paid their like the oil that Venezuela sells them in full, because everybody else, like Venezuela just gives to Cuba, for free. Russia and China take everything because they have other type of interest there. So they want to be recognized as a government, as a regular government. Now, there is something different that I saw after this election, which is that Nicolás Maduro was the one. It wasn't the other countries. It was Nicolás Maduro, the one who cut ties, at least diplomatic ties, with some of the countries that are asking questions regarding this election, like Argentina, Costa Rica, and some others in the region, Chile, for example. So what I'm seeing right now is that maybe Maduro is saying, okay, this is just gonna be the last time that we put up a farce like this. Maybe, I don't know. And maybe they are actually trying to isolate themselves this time, just like North Korea, since nobody's believing them anymore. That just because you're holding elections, you are a democratic government. I don't know. Maybe I'm being pessimistic. This is just a speculation from what I'm seeing. This is the first time that is Maduro, the one who cuts ties with all of the other countries and not the other way around.
Yeah, he could just declare a state of emergency and not hold elections, Brian. Because at some point the elections become so hollow. the value diminishes. It's a bit like, let's say, Nicaragua, or like you say, in North Korea or something. Who cares if you hold an election? No one's going to take it seriously anyway.
Exactly. So I'm worried about it actually because if that becomes the case, it's actually going to be impossible, even through other means, to get rid of the government, of that regime.
Well, this is the problem that I sensed this a decade ago, as you mentioned, the Henrique Capriles election, and there were just massive protests in the country at that time, and obviously the regime came out and shot a bunch of people. Okay, so, but I thought, well, we can have big protests, we can have vast awareness of the problem, but those in power, it's not like they're just going to say, oh, let's just go home now. No. Or let's just go and hang out in Cuba, right? No. So it really begs the question, and I know people don't like to talk about this, but is there a growing sense among the opposition that there needs to be a military intervention?
That has been growing since 2019, at least. Some people actually requested that before, but when the international community recognized Juan Guaido, there was a saying among Venezuelans basically telling Guaido, order the pizza. You know, we were saying order the pizza, meaning ask for the international intervention, you know, especially from the US, because at that time we had Donald Trump in the White House, we had Ivan Duque in Colombia, and we had Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. So the two countries that had borders with Venezuela and the US, being obviously the US, basically the only the only big like strong economy and country in the region, they were against Juan Guaido. So there were actually conditions, but he never even requested, he never even tried. Every single information that we got is that he and his representatives were actually avoiding that path. You know, when somebody actually came up with this proposal, they were like, "Oh no, please don't do that." And when you look at people like John Bolton, for example, or you know that they're not fans of Donald Trump right now. Mike Sper was the other one. They said that Donald Trump had all of the intentions to intervene Venezuela, but he didn't do it because you have these people trying to convince him not to do it. So uh, that is actually really popular among Venezuelans. Don't believe the propaganda that, oh, people don't want intervention. They want an intervention. According to my analysis, in those years, it was about 70-80% of the population, more or less the real numbers that Edmundo González Urrutia got in these elections. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, because there's a saying in English that you can vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out, right? And I do remember that discussion going on in the late 2010s that yes, Donald Trump was open to the idea, but he didn't want to do it alone. He didn't want to feel like he was some, yes, imperialista coming in and violating Latin American society or imposing American wishes. And there was Piñera in Chile, Macri in Argentina, Bolsonaro. There were all these guys who you would think might be sympathetic, and they just said, "Ah, no es vale la pena. It's not worth it." Yeah.
But you know something? I don't blame them. I would think the main leader in that effort should have been, I mean, besides obviously Guaido, because he's the one that they recognized. So when you the easiest example right now would be to compare with Ukraine. Whether you like it or not, you know what's going on. Zelensky actually requested that help, and he's getting that help. You know, like he's getting resources, he's getting weapons and everything. Again, this is not us supporting that position, but whatever it is, he actually, from a Ukrainian point of view, he actually did what he had to do, which is what Juan Guaido, from a Venezuelan point of view, he didn't, right? But in the case of Ivan Duque, who was the president of Colombia, he actually had reasons to act, even without the approval of Guaido or Maduro, obviously. Why? Because the Colombian guerrilla operates in Venezuela. The Colombian guerrilla is getting support, is getting assistance by the regime. So he could easily say, this is a national security issue because these people, they are organizing themselves in Venezuela, they are training in Venezuela, they are getting resources from Venezuela to attack Colombia. And the regime, Nicolás Maduro, they're not doing anything.
It's a defensive mechanism, defensive measure.
Exactly, it's a defensive mechanism, but he didn't do it. So before blaming Piñera, who didn't actually have a real reason, other than obviously the massive migration, because that is another issue. You could say that massive migration is also, a threat to your country, whatever it is. You can use those arguments, but in the case of Colombia was way easier, and he didn't do it either.
Yeah, at the time, I was actually in Paraguay, and Marito, I can't remember the name of the president at the time, but Guaido was there, basically doing a public relations campaign, seeking to build support. And I don't know whether his campaign was just not successful, or maybe Guaido just feared for his own life and didn't want to have to face repercussions himself because he wanted to go back to Venezuela and have his life. But so that's basically there was a prominent think tank, the Center for Security Policy in the United States, that actually openly released a statement saying that the United States should arm the opposition. But is there even an opposition in Venezuela that could be armed, that would be organized to take weapons?
That's the part that I don't know, because this leadership, the leaders they always negotiate with the regime. They try to use this protest, to basically, they know that they're never gonna get to the presidency, but at least they can get a congressman, they can get a mayor, they can get, do you know what I mean? Because this has always happened in the past. We call people to protest on the streets, then little by little we tell them, oh no, go home, relax, we're now in a dialogue with the regime, and then there's elections next year, and they get a bunch of support, they get a bunch of power, not real power, but at least they control a state, they control a city or something like that.
They become part of the problem.
And let me actually read something to you that Maria Corina tweeted. Maria Corina has only had one public position, which is she was a congresswoman. We're talking about how the people right now, they have no weapons, they have no way to confront, to resist to these attacks by the regime, because obviously they have no weapons. The weapons is owned by the military and the criminals that are organized and armed by the regime. We call them collectivos. But this is a tweet from Maria Corina when she was a congresswoman. This is August 7th, 2012. If there was political will, the law for the disarmament and control of arms and ammunition would have already been approved. She proposed that law. She did. And it was approved after a few months, after that tweet, by everybody. The regime voted in favor, and the opposition also voted in favor. So yeah, we have no weapons. We cannot access them legally. There is a law, actually, written by her that says, oh no, you cannot own weapons in Venezuela. So if you're not a skeptic about this type of people, then I don't know what to tell you. Again, I'm not saying nothing's going to happen, because right now, for example, these protests that are going on right now, they are developing without the guidance or without the directions of Maria Corina or Edmundo. They actually say, oh no, we're going through a pacific path or whatever. This is just spontaneous people going to the streets protesting and confronting the military. So maybe there's a difference right now because people are fed up already with the regime. It's been already 25 years since Hugo Chavez took to power in 1999. But again, I don't know how you can confront a military personnel and the criminals. This is literally criminals that are armed, when you have hope, you have the energy, but you don't have the means right now. So I'm worried that this is going to be another bloodshed like the ones that we have seen in the past.
Yeah, that's actually one important point, that there are these almost quasi-paramilitary groups called the collectivos, these motorcycle gangs who go around and basically just shoot up things, smash cars, and scare people away from protesting. And so there's this almost spectrum of violence from the regime where, yes, they work with cartels, drug cartels, or these, let's say, experienced hardline criminal groups. And they have these less formal kind of Chavista clubs almost that go out and intimidate people. Do you want to just give a little bit of a mosaic for foreigners who don't understand how these things are even embedded in the government, how they even exist?
Because they're being supported by the government again. In this type of systems, you need to cover yourself from any maybe attempt to overthrow you. So maybe you have the military, sure, and right now they're loyal to you. You already know that the ones in big positions, they have to be loyal to you because for them it's actually a situation like the one that I described before.
They now have blood on their own hands.
Exactly. But maybe at the bottom or maybe, in the middle, maybe you have people who at a certain time they turn against you. I don't know. We have never seen that, but maybe the regime says, okay, eventually that can happen. So what is the way for them to guarantee that that is not going to happen and that they actually have support with people that have guns and know how to use them? The collectivos. These are just a bunch of criminals who are crazy. Maybe they feel powerful right now because they can go and commit crimes with impunity, right? Like, for example, if somebody's thinking about maybe switching sides, when they see that, they're gonna think it twice, So that is why they do it. It's just to make sure to make sure over the already assurance that they had that they're gonna remain in power.
It's another level of intimidation that is around, yeah. And one of the challenges too, much like the Cuba scenario, is that so many of the educated or wealthy people, let's say the natural aristocracy, have already left Venezuela. So it's hard to rebuild a country when half the successful people have already exited and may never return.
That is so true. Look, there are numbers that point out that poverty in Venezuela is over 90%. We're saying that, and people don't see it because obviously Venezuela has more infrastructure. Venezuela wasn't always like this. But according to those numbers, right now we're even poorer than Haiti. People cannot see because we have buildings, we have bridges, Haiti doesn't have that infrastructure. So when you go to Haiti or when you go to Venezuela, you're gonna see like a difference. Basically the environment and everything that you see is showing you that Venezuela is a richer country. It's actually kind of difficult to join the dots. But right now we're just talking about poverty in general, like the salaries, people that are that cannot eat 3 times a day, people that don't have certain conditions. In 2016 and 2017, Venezuelans in average lost 30 pounds because of the hunger, the general hunger that there was at the time. So yeah, it's horrible. That is what happens when communism actually takes in power. They force talented people to leave the country because they only want the ones that they can control, and they only want to get the benefits for whatever, money or power for themselves. They don't share.
Is there any aspect of this story that I've not touched upon that foreigners should know? And I know you're editor-in-chief, so maybe you have a bit of a hands-off approach in terms of pushing an agenda or an opinion, but is the staff of your organization, are they pushing for foreign intervention?
I mean, through the outlet, no. Again, we're not doing that, although we'll be open to polish it. Like that is not an issue. But right now, here is the issue, Fergus. We don't control what is happening. We don't control, for example, we're not the leaders right now of the opposition. So they are the ones that need to do that job. And the people who believe in that electoral path are the ones that need to force them, to act upon that. Because they were always saying, oh no, we're just going to use this election, again, as I mentioned before, just to do something else. We have a plan B or something like that. I don't think they have it, because of their actions right now. I'm seeing that everything is being kind of an improvisation. But they are the ones that need to do it. They are the ones that actually chose this path. Maria Corina Machado, since 2022, and before that, she said that going to elections was actually helping the regime. And she said it in international news, channels, like she said it like that. And she said anybody who calls, to participate in an election is an accomplice of the regime. Like she had a really, really strong position on that. And then she just changed everything, her speech, her strategy, even the people that she is surrounded by. Like these people, she accused them of being socialist, which they are, of being corrupted, which they are, of being accomplices of the regime, which they are. They are. Like they negotiate with them just to find these little positions of power. So I need to be skeptic. When you do a 180 degrees change on everything that you ever stood for, and I don't think that I'm in any position to request anything from her since the beginning. I have been like really critical and skeptical, and I didn't believe in the electoral path. So right now she's the one that needs to take decisions. Let's see how they develop. I hope that I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong. But again, I don't think it's my role right now to tell them, oh, do this, do that, when I actually don't believe in them.
Right. Okay. Esteban Hernández has been extremely generous with his time this morning. We thank you for that. Please go to ContraPoderNews.com. We'll have links to his Twitter and the outlet in the show notes. Please go to ImpunityObserver.com for more details. Otherwise, Esteban, keep up the great work and thank you for the insights today.
Thank you for having me and for actually spreading this information. We need it.